Hello, I'm Linda.
And I'm Terry.
This is the Society for the Blind on the Isle of Wight, the news for Friday the 23rd of February.
Tuesday. There will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the Society on Tuesday the 27th of February. The first in the West Wight at the end of the line Cafe Yarmouth from 10:30 to 12 p.m. and the second in Bembridge at the Cloisters from 10:15 also until 12 p.m. Please go along and support these if you are able. The Ride swimming group will be swimming this coming Tuesday evening, the 27th of February at the Waterside Pool in Ride. The swimming group has sole use of the pool during the session and there are lifeguards in attendance. If you are interested in joining these groups, please contact the Society to advise us of your swimming ability and for us to advise the Waterside Pool.
And on Wednesday, the weekly coffee morning will be held at Millbrook House that's the 28th of February. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of tea or coffee as well as a piece of cake. The Wednesday social group will also be meeting on Wednesday the 28th of February at 2 p.m. in Millbrook House. We will be joined by Slantavar, a musical group who sing traditional Irish and Scottish songs, play dances, reels, jigs and an unusual blend of modern songs. Their sound blends fiddle, mandola, guitar, flute and bodhran with voices. The Wednesday social group is open to all, not just members.
Thursday. The Thursday social group are meeting on Thursday the 1st of March at Millbrook House. The group meets from 10:30 until 2 p.m. You can have a chat and knit if you wish, and then later in the afternoon volunteers come in and read to the group from different topics.
Are you a crime fiction fan or a budding author? How would you like to combine the two? Join international best-selling authors Carol and Bob Bridgestock for an evening entitled Murder Behind the Scenes. The event will showcase the television programme Written in Blood, episode 7, which featured R.C. Bridgestock. After the programme there will be a question and answer session over a drink and nibbles. This event is being held at the Riverside Centre, The Quay, Newport, on Thursday the 19th of April at 6 p.m. As well as Carol and Bob's presence, there will also be entertainment from Emily Scotcher, professional makeup artist Pamela Clare, and Vectis Radio's Maggie and Kelvin Curry. Tickets are £6, which includes a drink and nibbles. Book now by calling Chris Kane on 522205 or email admin@iwsb.org.uk.
Scaffolding news. Here is a list of known footway obstructions for works including scaffolding or hoarding. We are unable to include the end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. Bay and Ventnor area. There is currently scaffolding at Wight City, Culver Parade, Sandown, 41 and 43A High Street, Shanklin, 48 North Street, Ventnor, Godshill Village Hall, School Road, Godshill, First Aid Hut, Esplanade, Ventnor. There are currently hoardings at Wight City, Culver Parade, Sandown, 1 Melville Street, Sandown, and the corner of Trinity Road and Madeira Road, Ventnor. There is currently a mobile crane at the corner of Perone Way and Downs View, Sandown. There are currently skips at 1 Melville Street, Sandown.
And in the Cows area, there is currently scaffolding at Red Squirrel Shop and Bella, 73 and 74 High Street, Cows, Max Aitken Museum, 83 High Street, Cows, 9 Bath Road, Cows, Grace's Bakery, High Street, Cows. There are also hoardings at 70 to 73 Arctic Road Cows, 93 High Street Cows, and there are skips at 6 Thetis Road Cows and 38 St Andrews Street Cows.
Newport area. There is currently scaffolding at 38 Key Street, Newport, 18 Lugley Street, Newport, Dominoes, 41 St James Street, Newport, on Bowling Green Lane, Braunston House, Lugley Street, Newport, 3 and 4 Holyrood Street, Newport, the former BHS store, Pyle Street, Newport, front and rear, 45 New Street, Newport, 75 Elm Grove, St Thomas's Church, St Thomas's Square, Readers, 33 South Street, Albany Lodge, Lugley Street, The Works, St James Square, The Waverley, 2 Clatterford Road. There are currently skips at the former BHS store in Pyle Street, 68 Upper St James Street and 53 Sylvan Avenue, Newport. New scaffolding is due up at St Cross House, St Cross Lane, Newport, due on the 5th of March. Also on the 5th of March, Bats Wing, Church Hollow, Godshill. Ride area. There is currently scaffolding at the Yarbridge, 99 New Road, Brading, the Star Inn High Street Ride, ABRI Madeira Road, Seaview, 51 to 52 High Street Ride, Royal Victoria Arcade, Union Street, 12 High Street and Albert Place Ride, Corner House, Church Street, Seaview. There are currently skips at the Slipway, High Street, Seaview, and Holy Cross Church, Pitts Lane, Binstead. Etherin, Newland Street, St Helens, 46 Park Road Ride. New scaffolding is due up at 41 to 42 High Street Ride on the 7th of May.
In the West Wight area, there's currently scaffolding at Bryston Viaduct on the Military Road, and there are currently skips at Florins High Street in Yarmouth. In this week's InTouch is an article about visual impairment and mental health. In August 2017, a visually impaired woman, Nina Davis, took her own life after several months of battling depression. Nina became visually impaired at an early age and lost her sight at the age of 17 while she was studying at the Royal National College for the Blind in Hereford. At that time, Nina seemed to cope well and adapted to her new set of circumstances. A few years later, Nina took a degree in social work but wasn't able to find a job in her chosen field. She also wanted to have a long-term partner and start a family. In July 2016, Nina lost her first guide dog, which she found very difficult, and later that year an 18-month-long relationship broke down. Nina began to feel depressed and started to withdraw from her friends and activities. Her independence and confidence suffered. Nina linked her depression and the difficulties she was facing directly to her visual impairment. Peter Wight speaks to Nina's mother Tracy and her good friend Diane Fonseca about what more could have been done to support and help Nina with her depression. Amanda Hawkins, manager of the RNIB's counselling service, tells us that a closer connection needs to be made between vision loss and mental health. The presenter is Peter Wight and the reporter Lee Commutat and the producer Lee Commutat and Georgina Hughes.
Now we come to the county press proper, and the headline this week is School Takeover. Christ the King head goes as crisis deepens. An interim board is poised to seize control of Christ the King College from the governing body in the wake of a multi-million-pound financial crisis that has rocked the island's top secondary school. Principal Pat Godhead has announced she will retire at the end of term, hot on the heels of her vice principal husband, David Godhead. Chair of Governors, David Lister, has stepped down after the Isle of Wight Council called for an immediate change in leadership. The Council has demanded the school repays its £2.7 million debt, borrowed to foot the annual £650,000 bill for hiring its sixth form centre from the company that owns it, and refused further lending. Children's Services Director Steve Crocker has written to Mr Lister describing his action plan as a step in the right direction, but ultimately inadequate. Unless it is strengthened, Mr Crocker warned he would proceed with plans to dismiss the governors and appoint an interim executive board to take over the running of the school from May. The process, supported by both the Christian diocese, which backed the school, has started and will only be halted if an improved plan is submitted by the end of the month. Vice Chair of Governors, Liz Burden, said the governing body firmly believed it should remain in place, and despite a difference of opinion on how the school had reached this point, it was committed to working with the council, diocese and legal team to find a solution. She said Mr Lister was a man of integrity and denied Mrs Godhead's position was untenable, as evidenced by the school's excellent exam results under her leadership. Mrs Godhead has retired because she was due to become a grandmother, she said. Mrs Burden said the school would review the authorities' comments on the very comprehensive plan and seek to strengthen it, and had already acted on some of the points raised. In the letter, Mr Crocker said he was not confident the council would get its money back, and the school needed to find another £445,000. The school plans to cut 8 to 12 teaching posts, but Mr Crocker said there were still too many leadership layers. Departments could be streamlined, and there was the need for niche sixth form subjects such as ancient history and classics, he said. Criticising Mr Lister for failing to keep governors informed, leaving them unable to hold leaders to account, and highlighting his close working relationship with Mrs Godhead, Mr Crocker said he had no confidence in his ability as chair and urged him to go. It would pave the way for a new leadership team to work with the council and implement an improved plan, he said. A question mark continues to hang over the sixth form, currently running at an annual deficit of £155,000, as the school has not found a way to pay for it. If the lease payments were not made and the buildings seized, Mr Crocker said the sixth form would be incorporated into the main building, merged with another school's sixth forms, or axed altogether. Council leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, said the lease agreement was ill-judged and taxpayers could not pick up the bill. Assuring parents and pupils, he said, Christ the King will remain open whatever happens, and those students presently in the sixth form will be able to complete their studies. Any suggestions this will not happen is untrue. The day-to-day running of the school is absolutely fine, and pupils are educated to a high standard. It is the financial management that is the problem. Christ the King College has argued it has been financially disadvantaged compared with other island schools and left with no choice but to hire its own sixth form. It believes the council should have provided the building. If an IEB is appointed, the debt will remain with the school, and the county press understands the governors who approved the lease agreement could be liable for the repayments.
Small change has made a big difference to Island children's charity Bewley House. The Yorkshire Building Society Charitable Foundation donated £2,000 to the Newport Residential and Respite Centre for children with learning difficulties and disabilities, collected from customers' small change. Each year, members donate the pennies from interest earned on their accounts to charities around the country. The money has enabled the charity to buy a touch-screen sensory computer. Bewley Respite Chair Tony Wake said, "There are many therapeutic and educational benefits a sensory computer can provide for children and young people with a wide range of needs and disabilities. We're really grateful to members of the Yorkshire Building Society. Like many other charities, we rely on donations in order to keep providing the vital services in a homely environment that many in our community rely on." Bewley House was nominated by Yorkshire's agency in Ryde, Ward House Mortgages and Life.
Woman brought phone into jail for prisoner. A teacher working at Her Majesty's Prison Isle of Wight smuggled a mobile phone into the jail after beginning a relationship with a serving prisoner. Joanne Hadfield, 47, of Barton Road, Newport, exchanged sexual messages with the prisoner on the contraband iPhone, Island magistrates heard. Hadfield admitted conveying a prohibited article into the prison when she appeared before Island magistrates on Friday. The court was told Hadfield had been a member of staff at HMP Isle of Wight, working in its education department. However, following the incident, she had resigned from her post. On March the 9th, police were made aware Hadfield had provided a mobile phone to the prisoner. The prisoner had subsequently passed the phone to another inmate. Inquiries revealed the prisoner had attended classes run by Hadfield and become her assistant. They subsequently began a relationship which involved some physical contact, said Vivian Dulcie, prosecuting. She had been persuaded by the prisoner to bring the phone into the prison, but he later made threats to report her to the prison authorities, resulting in her contacting a solicitor. When the phone was examined, it contained 639 messages between her and the prisoner, beginning on February the 9th, the majority of which were of a sexual nature, but also a declaration of affection. The court heard she had no previous convictions. Representing Hadfield, Keith Verinder said his client was a qualified schoolteacher who had worked in the prison service for 8 years. She taught domestic science, instructing prisoners how to cook for themselves. She said, "It is right she struck up a relationship with him. Clearly, that relationship went too far." He added Hadfield had taken the phone into the prison to the inmate so the inmate could keep in touch with her while she was on holiday. The case was adjourned to the Isle of Wight Crown Court for sentence on March the 9th. Hadfield was granted unconditional bail.
Council taxpayers in Sandown are looking at a 74% increase in their town council precept bills at the same time services such as beach cleaning are set to be cut. At a budget-setting meeting on Monday, it was revealed that an error by Sandown Town Council reclaiming VAT rebates from building work at the Broadway Centre had effectively wiped out the council's reserves. The council is also axing the town's £15,000 floral display budget, while the public toilets in Piers Street look set to close after members decided not to take them on from the Isle of Wight Council. The Town Council has already taken over the running of public conveniences at Yarvaland, Eastern Gardens and St John's Road, but members refused to take over the Piers Street toilets over fears they could cost thousands to repair. However, councillors did agree to spend cash to resurface the playground at Sandown Gardens, closed since December, but it is not expected to be open for Easter. The precept rise will mean an average Band D property will pay an extra £1.98 a week, a total bill of £177.16 a year, compared with £103.26 last year. Deputy Mayor Councillor Gary Young said, "This has been a difficult budget for the council. Recently we discovered we have problems in reclaiming the VAT paid out to the Broadway Centre. This problem has effectively wiped out the Town Council reserves." Councillor Heather Humby said she regretted passing such a budget, saying the council had taken on more responsibilities, such as maintaining parks and gardens. She said, "It's an awful lot for a small town like Sandown. In my 42 years as a councillor, the whole island has been responsible for tourism. The bulk of it came from the Isle of Wight Council, but the last 2 years have seen the responsibility put down to town and parish councils."
Body discovered. A body found in the search for Joanna Orton has been identified as the missing bride woman. Her body was found on the shore of Bosham, Sussex, and formal identification procedures have been completed, and the matter has now been passed to the coroner. A police spokesman said the family would like to express thanks to everyone involved for the extensive, dedicated and committed search for Joanna.
A man who intervened in a shop burglary ended up having his head caved in by a kick, which left him needing reconstructive surgery. Luke Orton, 20, of Madeira Road, Ventnor, who delivered the kick to Graham Chiverton, was convicted at Isle of Wight Crown Court of inflicting grievous bodily harm. Prosecuting, Anthony Bailey told the court, "This was a savage kick, a hard kick that caused the front of Mr. Chiverton's head to cave in. At hospital, he had to have gauze and pins put into his head to support the bone structure." The attack took place in the early hours of New Year's Day 2016. Premier Stores at 37A High Street was broken into and CCTV was used to identify 2 men who entered the shop and stole alcohol, Oliver Cooper and Connor Keats, Mr. Bailey told the court. Cooper went back for more, and Mr. Chiverton, who had been at a friend's party, went outside and saw Cooper coming down the road with the stolen goods, Mr. Bailey said. He took hold of Cooper, but the thief got away, knocking Mr. Chiverton to the ground, at which point Orton kicked him in the face, knocking him out, Mr. Bailey said. Mr. Chiverton was taken to hospital and was transferred to Southampton for 5 days of specialised treatment. In a statement read out in court, Mr. Chiverton said that at hospital he had to make a difficult decision. Without surgery, he was at risk of brain disease, but having surgery could lead to brain damage. It was incredibly difficult, Mr. Chiverton said in his statement. Either way could be life-threatening. I was really angry and upset. Defending Orton, Christopher Wing said, "The issue here is of identification. No one is disputing the fact that this offence took place, but are we sure it was Luke Orton who caused these injuries?" The jury found Orton guilty of inflicting GBH, but not guilty of the more serious crime GBH with intent. A sentencing date is yet to be set. Cooper and Keats pleaded guilty to burglary and were sentenced on August the 22nd last year. Cooper received a £750 fine and was ordered to pay a £100 compensation. Keats was given a 12-month community order with 15 days rehabilitation activities and 100 hours of unpaid work and was ordered to pay £297 compensation.
Police probe bus shelter founder. Bus shelter founder Kevin Newton paid £10,000 of public money into his own bank account in a transaction signed off by 2 elderly trustees recruited from the retirement home where he had worked previously. Reports filed with the Charity Commissioner identified irregular or unexplained payments of £12,878 between August 2016 and July 2017, plus financial control failures, including reliance on personal bank accounts and a conflict of interest between Mr. Newton and the trustees. Fraud allegations have been reported to Action Fraud and the police, who have launched an investigation. Speaking to the county press, Mr. Newton accepted he had transferred a £10,000 Isle of Wight Council grant to another company he had founded, the Bus Shelter Global Limited. The company was not actually incorporated until later in April last year and was dissolved this month. Although it was not agreed in writing, Mr. Newton said it was understood by the council the money should be paid to him as the salary. He said the remaining £2,878 had been spent on work to the bus. I was working in excess of 110 hours a week. I didn't think it was wrong. The trustee agreed it should be paid to me. The council made the cheque payable to the Isle of Wight bus shelter because that was the organisation that provided the service. But it was always intended as compensation for my work, said Mr. Newton of Abingdon Road, Ryde. I think people will accept charities need employees, and £10,000 for the amount of work I did is nothing. Councillor Julia Baker-Smith, leading on homelessness at the time, agreed the money was intended to run the shelter and included staff costs. 2 of the 3 trustees were elderly neighbours in a retirement home. When asked why he had approached them to oversee the charity, given their lack of experience, Mr. Newton said he had not expected the project to grow as it did, and admitted they had become overwhelmed. Mr. Newton said he informed the trustees of all decisions which were logged, but when he received cash donations, he would use them to buy items for the bus. Due to poor controls, a financial examiner said, it is likely other costs incurred by the charity have not been incurred exclusively for the charitable activities. The bus shelter's new manager, Carl Prince, said the charity was in a mess when he stepped in. Kev was not a paid employee. That £10,000 was for the charity, not one person. The council gave him the money as a salary? Nonsense, he said. Mr. Newton said he was no longer involved with the bus shelter, which had been out of action whilst a new site is found. He said he had suffered a breakdown due to working excessive hours and continued to suffer with anxiety and depression. Mr. Prince said the Charity Commission was satisfied the bus shelter was now being run properly with new trustees, and he had met with Isle of Wight Council officers in order to find a new site for the bus. I first contacted Kev because I thought this was a great idea. I still do. There are still people sleeping rough because there is nowhere else for them to go. This has been incredibly damaging.
Reaching out to more people is the aim of a new service at Mountbatten Hospice. The launch of the Mountbatten Coordination Centre heralds a change in the way people can receive help. GPs are now able to refer patients who are likely to be in the last 5 years of life, whereas the hospice previously was involved in the final year of life expectancy. This means up to 5,000 extra people on the island could use the service. Additionally, a 24/7 phone line will be manned, offering advice and support to those under hospice outreach care, whereas previously they had to rely on a 111 service out of hours. Hospice Chief Executive Nigel Hartley said, "This is a big deal for us as it means we will reach a lot more people. Most people who die over a long period of time do not get much support until the last year, so we're looking to reach those people and get them assessed by a nurse so we can get a plan in place. Having the 24/7 helpline will give people peace of mind and reassurance. There is advice and support whenever they most need it." The new service is specifically for people on the island living with any illness which may be life-threatening and which may limit life expectancy to the next 5 years or less, and any older person living with increasing frailty. Those referred to the centre will have their information added to the Share My Care register, an electronic record of their decisions and preferences with regards to their care. With the person's permission, this can be accessed by the professionals responsible at any time of the day or night, so people can be confident everyone looking after them knows their wishes. The centre has been funded initially for 2 years through the island's My Life a Full Life model of care and the Daisy Foundation. There are 4 new members of office staff and 3 nurses working for the centre.
Vulnerable children will be hit by cuts. Plans to axe alternative school workshops have been condemned. with one foster mother slamming the Isle of Wight Council for abandoning vulnerable children. An email to education staff leaked to the county press reveals the extent of proposed cuts to alternative provision. In addition to the closure of Branston Farm, as reported, the council plans to axe the WISE Workshop Initiative for Support in Education service. Based at Dodner, WISE offers practical activities such as woodwork and mechanics to children who struggle with mainstream education. The email acknowledges the transformative impact on the lives of young people, but claims budgetary pressures have rendered it unviable. A council spokesperson said demand had increased as more schools offered their own alternative programmes and just 13 students attended each week. Cathy Godolphin, who has fostered almost 20 children, mainly teenagers, said WISE was a vital service that enabled children to reach their potential. 3 of my foster children have gone through WISE. It's small and nurturing. It builds their self-esteem. I've seen how it turns kids around, said COW's therapist Cathy. Not all children fit into mainstream school, especially when they have had difficult lives. They need extra care and attention. What's left for them if this is taken away? A Save WISE Facebook campaign launched this week has already attracted support from people who believe the council should be continuing to fund the service. According to the council's budget proposals, restructuring high needs provision will save £15,000, closing Branston Farm £70,300 and cutting the careers service £33,000. The authority's school forum has also agreed to transfer almost £350,000 from the mainstream schools budget to propping up high needs provision, a move criticised by school unions. Isle of Wight ATL Secretary Peter Shreve described the lack of high needs funding and rising demand as a hidden crisis in education. How will robbing mainstream students and schools, where students have a wide variety of needs, of funding, ensure these children receive the education and support they deserve, he said. Local authorities play a vital role in supporting schools by providing specialist support services. They cannot achieve this without more resources. A council spokesman said, "It is wrong to say this is an attack on the school's budget. The purpose of the high needs block is to provide education in schools for vulnerable pupils, and that is what the funding will do."
Claiming nearly £9,000 worth of benefits while working in a charity shop landed a woman from Binstead in the dock. Helen Downer, 42, of Coniston Avenue, admitted dishonestly failing to notify a change of circumstances affecting her entitlement to Employment Support Allowance, ESA, when she appeared before Island magistrates on Monday. The court was told Downer had been in receipt of the benefit between April 2015 and January 2017. The initial claim had not been dishonest, but she began working for the Multiple Sclerosis Society and failed to declare what she was doing, said Anne Smout, prosecuting. She illegally claimed a total of £8,811. Downer claimed she had twice contacted officials at the Department for Work and Pensions about her change in circumstances, but no record of her getting in touch by letter or phone could be found, added Mrs. Smout. The court was told that Downer was a woman of previous good character. Representing Downer, Oscar Vincent said his client had separated from her husband and that the relationship had been abusive. She had moved from Lincolnshire back to the Isle of Wight and now lived with her parents. When she got the job with the MS Society as a shop manager, she was only being paid the minimum wage. He said, "It remains her case. She tried twice to contact the DWP to inform them of her change of circumstances. Magistrates heard she had come to an arrangement to pay back the money. Downer was sentenced to a 12-month community order with an £85 surcharge and £85 costs.
Trees vandalised. Vandals have trashed the award-winning Ventnor Park. The cordyline plants, which originate from Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, and are known for their attractive foliage in shades of green, bronze and purple, have been destroyed by mindless vandals. The Isle of Wight Council said the Parks Department had been on site to assess the damage. A spokesperson said, "The Parks Department is a very small and hard-working team that will go above and beyond in making sure our parks are lovely places for all of us to enjoy, and this is one part of their role they find extremely frustrating and saddening."
Challenge and Adventure will close its charity shop at the end of the month. The Island charity, which works with disadvantaged young people, opened the shop in Lugley Street, Newport, 5 years ago. Although it has turned a profit, it has not made enough money to pay a full-time manager. The charity's fundraising manager, Karen Eales, has stepped up to run the shop during the last year, but said she needed to focus on her fundraising role. Rather than take the shop on for another 5 years, we will be focusing on our fundraising events. We already have 13 booked in for this year. I want to thank all the volunteers for their support because we couldn't have done it without them. Karen will now concentrate on the charity's events for 2018 from her office at the old grammar school. The next event is the charity duck race on March 31st at noon by Shide Trees, Newport.
Isle of Wight Council's Budget 2018-19 investment proposals labelled Dead Duck. It was supposed to net the cash-strapped Isle of Wight Council £5 million a year to help protect vital services. But at a meeting last week, the authorities planned to borrow £100 million at low interest rates and invest it in low-risk industrial office and retail properties was branded a dead duck by an opposition councillor. It was hoped the controversial scheme, approved by councillors 24 votes to 7, with 5 abstentions last September, would generate £5 million a year for council coffers. However, at a meeting of the council's cabinet last Thursday, Finance Cabinet member Councillor Stuart Hutchinson said expected returns were not anticipated to be as great as originally planned. On top of this, the meeting heard new government criteria stated investments could not be made purely for profit and rules regarding debt repayment had been tightened. It was independent Labour councillor Jeff Brodie who highlighted the absence of the £5 million from the 2018-19 budget and questioned what had happened. He said it was sold to members of the council on the basis it would produce up to £5 million income. There is no mention of that income in the 2018-19 budget. Where is the profit that was supposedly making from this highly risky borrowing? Councillor Hutchinson said, "We made an approval in principle that we would borrow the money and had the opportunity arose, and had all the opportunities arose, yes, that would have been great, but we can't invent them."
More than £10,000 has been confiscated from the director of an Isle of Wight firm which provided unlicensed security guards. Acting on anonymous intelligence, investigators from the Security Industry Authority, the SIA, inspected several sites in June 2016 and found an unlicensed security guard in a site guard uniform at Medina Yard, Cowes. Further inquiries revealed another unlicensed security guard was carrying out mobile patrols and static security duties elsewhere on the island. Site Guard Director Victor Lewis, his son Anthony Lewis, and Site Guard Security Limited pleaded guilty to employing unlicensed security guards at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court in December. Victor Lewis also pleaded guilty to providing false information to the SIA. When asked for information, he falsely claimed it could not be disclosed as it related to the Ministry of Defence. On Monday, at Portsmouth Crown Court, Victor Lewis was ordered to pay more than £10,000 following an order under the Proceeds of Crime Act. He was also fined £750 and ordered to pay costs of £2,500. Anthony Lewis, who acted as a director to avoid Sightguard being listed as wound up at company's house, was ordered to pay a £75 fine and £225 costs. Sightguard Security Limited was given a nominal fine of £1. This was not the first time the SIA had investigated Sightguard. In 2013, the company was issued with an improvement notice for supplying unlicensed security operatives. SIA Criminal Investigations Manager Nathan Salmon said, "Where appropriate, we will encourage compliance in the first instance. However, despite our efforts to work with Sightguard Security Limited, they ignored the need to comply. The penalties awarded by the court reflect the culpability by the offenders." Victor Lewis could not act as a director of this company due to a previous director disqualification. His son enabled the company to continue trading. However, Victor continued to use unlicensed operatives. "We will not hesitate to prosecute those who display a blatant contempt for regulation and undermine the confidence and reassurance that regulation provides."
More on the budget. Warning over increase in care charges. Care charges affecting the island's most vulnerable have been approved despite warnings it could lead to people taking their own lives. Changes to the non-residential care charging policy will see the higher and enhanced disability benefit rates taken into consideration during the means testing for care home services. Isle of Wight disability campaigner Sam Jeffries expressed concern about the policy. People are already struggling as a result of higher costs of living on top of their disability. This will potentially put people at breaking point and could result in people taking their own lives as a result. The policy will affect around 770 people who receive the higher rate of attendance allowance, disability living allowance and personal independent payments. They could be charged an extra £27.45 a week or £1,427 a year, which will raise more than £934,000 for the council over the next year. Speaking at Cabinet last week, Cabinet Member for Social Care, Councillor Mosdale, said, "The recommendation I am bringing before Council is a very difficult one. I have no pleasure in it." Nearly 500 people urged the Council not to press ahead with its plans during the consultation. One woman said she was left with just £7 a week after paying her bills, which she used to go swimming with a carer. A hardship fund will be made available to protect the most vulnerable, and although initial fund stands at £100,000, this was not capped. The Isle of Wight Council leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, said, "We have considered these consultation responses. We have also considered the wider picture. We can protect the most vulnerable." Councillor Stuart Hutchinson added, "Although we have set a base amount, we have given a commitment. If those approved claims are more than that, we will pay it." That's all we have time for. So it's goodbye from
Linda
and from Terry. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Good morning, everyone. This is the County Press for Friday, February 23rd, and it's Barry and
Pauline.
And here we have a letter from Gordon Barton, Secretary of Ryde Lions Club. Following the recent revelations concerning employees of Oxfam, I would like to point out that all NGOs do not rely on paid remote employees to deliver aid. The Isle of Wight Lions Club are members of the Lion Clubs International. We are part of a global network of 1.4 million volunteers. When a humanitarian crisis strikes, Lion Clubs International Foundation works with and is guided by its own Lions members, who are ordinary people present on the ground. As the world's largest voluntary, non-governmental organisation, our volunteers fundraise in their own communities. We don't spend money on fancy fundraising campaigns. All our administration and marketing costs are funded by members' subs. It can prove difficult providing aid, but it is committed to not wasting money. Lions clubs are very grateful for public support, which enable us to commit to solving long-term problems through our presence throughout the world. Isle of Wight Lions clubs support a range of good causes and local projects. Where you can get involved, please contact us on 0845 833 5789. For more information, contact ride at lions105d.org.uk.
And this is a letter from Carl Feeney, a director of Able Connections Limited, Newport. And Carl Feeney is writing about the viability study related to the fixed link across the Solent. He writes, last week's CP headline, Cash Plea for Fixed Link Study Turned Down, was based on statements from the Isle of Wight Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive Kevin Smith. On February the 1st, Able Connections presented the case for a fixed link viability study to the Isle of Wight Chamber's Economic Advisory Panel, which happened to include a Wight Link director. We requested the Chamber assist us in letting member businesses be informed to allow them the opportunity to contact Able Connections, if they wished, to potentially become involved in sponsoring the study. The Chamber itself was not asked for funding at all. I have subsequently shown to the County Press editorial staff email threads between the Chamber and Able Connections which confirm what we had wanted. I asked the Chamber to publish a statement rectifying matters. However, I was informed Kevin Smith was on holiday this week, so unable to arrange the statement. I thank the County Press for instead giving me the opportunity to set the record straight promptly. To reiterate, an independent viability study has to be undertaken to understand whether a fixed link can be constructed via toll income and Solent area economic revenue benefits. Any institution which obstructs or resists this study is certainly behaving irresponsibly and to the detriment of the island and the Solent region. It will also be opposing the recommendations of the Isle of Wight Transport Infrastructure Task Force. Able Connections will organise the study through a regional steering committee, but not carry it out. It doesn't matter whether anyone is emotively pro or anti a fixed link. The information gleaned from the study will allow us to either move forward further with a much larger feasibility study or alternatively submit to rely solely on ferries to cross the Solent. The study will put that question to bed and we can move on in either direction.
And here's a letter from Mr. Piers of Brading. I am writing to you about the article in the County Press 16th of February 18 highlighting the work carried out on Brading Down by Gift to Nature. I have walked on these downs for over half a century and I was left infuriated and pulling my hair out by the sight of the desecration of the down and the loss of a beautiful apple tree, which year on year bore delicious yellow fruit enjoyed by walkers, birds and cattle alike. This tree was massacred unnecessarily, as there are trees of equal height on the same level which remain. If this is supposed to be a gift to nature, I am left pondering the suitability or experience of those managing the project, as the loss of trees means the loss of birds in that area. It is also not a gift to nature to needlessly cut down trees and undergrowth to apparently gain a better view of the sea. Consultation over a few years with locals who have a knowledge of the wildlife and layout of the area would have been beneficial, instead of the hurried manner which has resulted in the bulldozed landscape which remains. I hope this is the end to the pointless exercise of man encroaching on an area of historic interest and beautiful wildlife site to be enjoyed by locals and tourists alike, without displacing flora, fauna or animals.
This is a letter from Linda Stoneham, Sandown, and the heading is "Don't Miss Out on Little Jimmy." With regard to an article a few weeks ago, re Jimmy Osmond, Moon River Show, which is appearing at the Shanklin Theatre on Sunday, March the 11th, I would like to say, having seen this show in Southsea in October 2016, when he first brought it to the UK, I would highly recommend it. It is a wonderful show featuring the songs of the late Andy Williams, sung wonderfully by Jimmy Osmond, the superb Charlie Green and Emily Penny. And of course Jimmy sings some of the famous hits of the Osmonds, so get your tickets for this truly wonderful show. Jimmy will be coming back to Shanklin Theatre in September 2018 with his 70s hit show. I will be able to report about this show at the end of March.
And young drivers so helpful to us, from S. Tester of Chale. My car suffered a bad puncture while I was driving home with my son from Newport along the Whitcomb Road late on Thursday night last week. We started to replace the wheel, but were having great difficulties when a young man stopped his car and offered to help. A few minutes later a friend of his also stopped to help. They took over and did the job without fuss, and then they restarted the car with jump leads because we had exhausted the battery while waiting and working. I never found out their names, but want to record my great thanks for their kindness and skill.
Sophie Hale, Freshwater, writes about disabled parking rules being enforced. For years it was like winning the lottery to be able to find a disabled parking space at Tesco's Superstore in Ryde, and what was most infuriating was only around half the cars parking in them had a blue badge up on display. You would find ignorant people who just wanted a bigger space to park in because they had a huge Land Rover 4x4 type vehicle and didn't want it scratched. However, on our latest visit to this store, we came across an unprecedented amount of free, empty, disabled parking spaces, and a large sign above from Horizon Parking stating that there is a £70 parking fine enforced in the Tesco customer car park to make sure that there are always disabled spaces available for those who need them. So I would like to congratulate Tesco on this move and hope that this will be enforced everywhere soon enough.
And here we have a letter from Jackie Hawthorne of Freshwater. 3 adult family members and I went to Shanklin Theatre last Friday to see the excellent Milton Jones and his equally impressive supporting act, comedian Chris Stokes. We sat in the second row of the stalls. We were unfortunate enough to have sitting behind us in row C a husband and wife who started the show by arguing loudly between themselves to the extent that other members of the audience were looking round to see where the disturbance was coming from. When the support act came on, the female member of this gruesome twosome began catcalling, using offensive language and terminology. I know many stand-up comedians are happy to have a heckler to bounce off, but this was no witty banter or amusing heckling. It was foul language and downright nasty behaviour. Chris Stokes did well to deal with these interruptions in his act, but appeared surprised and a little upset by the events. During the interval, this husband and wife combo continued to argue loudly to the point where I turned round saying, "Excuse me, but if you want to have an argument, would you like to do it outside, as you are ruining the evening for other people?" I will not repeat the threats and abuse which I then received from this female. Other audience members supported me and backed my request for them to shut up. Several audience members expressed the view theatre staff should have evicted the couple, and a member of my family went to find a male member of staff to report this. He was then told that despite there being numerous witnesses, including female staff members, he would not take action unless he witnessed the behaviour for himself. The point of this letter is this. Shanklin Theatre has in recent months attracted some top-line acts. If they are to continue to do so, they need to take a firmer stance with regard to obnoxious and antisocial behaviour. Over an hour after returning home, we were still wound up and discussing what we witnessed, when we should have been discussing the evening's entertainment. Theatre tickets are not cheap. Come on, Shanklin Theatre. We should not have to tolerate this. And there's an editor's footnote. Having also been at this performance myself, my anger was directed at the loudmouths rather than volunteers who manned the theatre. But point taken.
And this is a letter from John Frederick Stroud, who currently lives in Malaga in Spain. And he writes, on March the 27th, 1957, I left Ryde to start my RAF National Service, signed on, travelled the world and never came back to the island. Now, 60 years later, I am coming home with my 3 rescue dogs and completing my circle of life on March the 20th in Sea View. Like they say, you can take the boy out of the island, but you can never take the island out of the boy.
And a note from Andrew, Debby and George Green of Shanklin. While travelling through London during half-term, we noticed a historical plaque with a strange coincidental link between the district of Petersham and the Isle of Wight's outline. The question would be, who has the patent on the shape?
And we now move on to looking back, and we're looking back 100 years ago to February the 23rd, 1918. A Newport man returned home after being released from capture in Turkey. Rifleman Douglas Wight, 25, was first reported missing after the Battle of Gaza the previous April. His parents had been left in suspense as to his fate until January, when a letter from him, dated August, notified them he was a prisoner of war in Turkey. He had been shot through the left shoulder and in the foot, and been left lying on the battlefield for 3 days before being picked up by the Turks. Another Ireland wrote to his parents to describe his time in Jerusalem. He wrote, "Rations have been very scarce. The only Christmas fare I had was an orange I had brought with me."
And 75 years ago, February the 27th, 1943, a medical officer had a fortunate escape while driving in Newport from her freshwater home. Dr. Neville Jennings had pulled in to allow some sheep to pass when the road disappeared. Her car fell down a steep incline for 70 feet, turning over several times. She was able to climb out of the car with only severe bruising. And there was great concern over the restrictions imposed on growers. It was made a criminal offence to raise bedding plants, pot plants or cut flowers from seeds until the end of the war. A few growers were forced to take up alternative crops until the end of the war.
And 50 years ago, February the 24th, 1968, a historic school was converted into a youth centre. The newly renovated King James Grammar School hoped to have a new role to play in the lives of the island's young people. There was a large gym equipped with a trampoline, a photographic darkroom, library, general workshop and pottery. The smell from a pig farm was given as a reasonable objection to the northward rate increase. Mr. Guyon said the pig farm, which was directly behind his property, had dumped manure all over his garden. He had tried to sell the property, but applicants had turned it down due to the smell. He was among 12 residents objecting to the proposed rate increase.
And 25 years ago, February the 19th, 1993, 6-year-old Ian Welby of the Yarmouth C of E Primary School was well and truly beaten to the finish in the annual pancake race because his pancake landed on his head. Ian had tossed the pancake so high it landed on top of his hat, and by the time he had retrieved it, the rest of the children in the square had left him behind. A fixed link to the mainland would be a bridge too far, according to the majority of those who called the county press phone line. The county press ran a phone poll with nearly 7,000 responses. There was a more than 2.1 majority against the fixed link.
10 years ago, an Ireland resident claimed it took a very long time to book his Red Funnel crossing. Bob Hayward of Lake said each time he rang, he was placed number 16 in the queue, and it would take half an hour to move up just a few positions. He tried repeatedly over the following few days, but only ever managed to get up to number 8 in the queue. A spokesperson for Red Funnel said, "We are really busy, which is good news for the island." Hair today, gone tomorrow for a shop worker from East Cowes, Rosalie Wheeler, had the hair-raising experience when she helped raise cash for her colleague's injured son, who was confined to a wheelchair. Her efforts raised almost £900.
And Wight Memories, Donham Newnham recounts the history of Newport Minster from its beginnings in 1180 to the present day. Standing surprisingly hidden amid the supermarkets and shops of Newport is the Church of St Thomas, Newport Minster. There has been a church on this site since 1180 AD, and although it was one of the only buildings to survive the burning of Newport by French invasion in 1377, there is nothing left of the original Norman church. In 1643, the interior of the church was destroyed by fire. The current church was rebuilt in 1854 with the backing of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert in the grand Victorian style as fitting the island's main town. The lofty 138-foot Gothic tower with pinnacle intricate carvings and sweeping arches within the church are typical of the time. The strange form of name, St Thomas, is due to the change in religious standing during the Tudor times. The church was named St Thomas the Martyr for Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was murdered by knights of Henry II in 1170. However, during the reign of Henry VIII, St Thomas Becket was deemed to be a traitor, and the martyred part of the name was dropped as the church adopted the name of St Thomas the Apostle. When the current church was built during the Victorian era, Prince Albert laid a foundation stone which dedicated the church to both saints, giving rise to its unusual name. Carvings of both saints can be seen outside on each side of the west door. In the aptly named Princess Elizabeth Chapel in the north aisle is a large marble tomb dedicated to Princess Elizabeth, the daughter of Charles I. Kept as a political prisoner by the Roundheads during the Civil War, Elizabeth, the younger daughter of Charles I, was imprisoned in Carisbrooke Castle. Well thought of for her gentle temperament and intelligence, having mastered 8 languages by the age of 8 years of age, she had been a political prisoner of Parliament since the age of 6. She died at just 14 years of age, most likely from catching a cold that may have turned to pneumonia. This was a real embarrassment to Parliament, who had her quietly interred in St Thomas's without a memorial. In 1753 her tomb was discovered and marked by a small brass plaque, but it wasn't until the rebuilding of St Thomas she was officially recognised.
Queen Victoria stated her lowly burial place was not a fit resting place for a royal princess and commissioned a suitable tomb to be created. She is seen resting upon an open Bible, the portcullis bars lifted as she is freed from her prison in death. To the left is a stained glass window, also donated by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, so harsh sunlight might not fall on her face. Her remains are buried beneath the altar. The Princess Elizabeth tomb is not the only striking one in the church. In the south aisle is the carved tomb of an Elizabethan pirate, Sir Edward Horsey, A staunch supporter of Elizabeth over her sister Mary, Edward Horsey was sent in exile to France in 1556, where he continued his support of Elizabeth. After looking after England's sea defences, he was eventually pardoned in 1565 and was named captain of the Isle of Wight, a position he retained until his death from plague in 1583. Among the other treasures within St Thomas's are a delicately carved pulpit that luckily survived the fire of 1643. Of Flemish design, the pulpit was donated by the Mayor of Newport, whose crest, an arm holding a battle axe, is featured on the backboard. The other carvings, surprisingly, feature not biblical figures but sciences and teachings of that period, and they are said to be the best in the country. There is also a priest stool that was made from the medieval rood screen. There are 2 plaques with carvings that read, "Fear God and honour the King." The latter was defaced by the Puritans during the Protectorate, but has since been repainted. In the south aisle is a large wooden chest with 3 locks. During the reign of Henry VIII, after the split from Rome, Thomas Cromwell ordered complete parish records of every baptism, marriage and death, as well as other day-to-day items that may appear, be placed into a chest with 3 locks, 1 key held by each parish warden and 1 by the vicar.
Also of note are the 2 baptismal fonts. One by the south door was built at the same time as the Victorian renovations, because the original font, dated 1633, disappeared until 2004, when a lady reported finding the font in her garden in Newport. It had been used as a bird bath. Now back in its rightful place, it is still used on occasion. The scale model of St Thomas by the west door was built in 1953 by the former vicar, the Reverend C.R. Farnsworth. As no plans remained of the Victorian building, he had to climb up onto the roof with a plumb line to gain the correct measurement for his model. For £1 you can light the interior lights and hear the bells chime. St Thomas has a strong royal connection with its links to Tudor, Stuart and Victorian monarchs, and it still continues today. The Earl of Wessex is a patron of the Newport Minster Renewal campaign, and at the entrance of the south door are 2 carved heads of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. In 2008, St Thomas was given the right to be called Newport Minster. Newport Minster continues to serve as a centre in Newport and beyond. A favoured venue for concerts, it played host to the award ceremony for the Blind Society short story writing competition in December. As fitting for the island's heart, Newport Minster is steeped in history, as well as being present in the community today.
And this is a view from Alan Marriott. The heading is "The Council Tax Follies Are Here Again." When you've been working in local newspapers for as long as I have, some early spring occurrences become as familiar as lambs being born or daffodils appearing. The most consistent of these is the council budget. I am sadly old enough to remember the rates, briefly, the dreaded community charge, and now the council tax. But in 38 years on local rags, certain aspects of this annual performance have become boringly predictable. This is the scenario that plays out year after year after year. Number 1, ahead of budget, ruling party starts sabre-rattling and making noises about nothing being safe from cuts. Number 2, opposition begins similar rituals, accusing rulers of being out of touch with people. Number 3, budget is announced, never being quite as bad as feared, but still this year a 6% council tax rise is not to be sniffed at. Number 4, opposition noises get louder with alternatives announced left, right and centre, knowing full well there is no danger of them being implemented due to the party being in a minority. Now, this is all well and good and is part of the political pantomime which is the inevitable consequence of that wonderful thing called democracy, but it also leaves one with a depressing sense of déjà vu. I witnessed it at left-wing councils on Merseyside in the 1980s, with councillors regularly walking out of chambers in some well-rehearsed hissy fit, and the Isle of Wight Council's 2018 version is far more civilised. However, wouldn't it be more comforting if some of the more unusual proposals in the 18-19 budget were properly dissected instead of going through these rites of spring? A couple of things caught my eye in the latest financial settlement. One of these was the spending on doing up gyms, etc. at the Heights Leisure Centre. And yes, I get the theory these improvements will bring in more cash to the coffers from the island's gym bunnies. Speculate to accumulate. Two thoughts spring to mind. Last year the council put aside the money for similar sprucing up of the stepping machines at Medina Leisure Centre. So are these paying dividends now? And what do the owners of the island's many private gyms and health clubs think of the council spending money on competing with their hard-pressed businesses? Bit odd, this one surely from a Tory, small government party, which since time began has trumpeted itself as the champion of the small businessman. Also at a time when social care thresholds are rising and people are saying they will not be able to manage with the new paltry amounts they receive, what on earth are we going to get for the £70,000 being spent on the Queensgate multi-use games area known as a mugger in East Cowes? I declare an interest here in that I drag my bulky torso around said mugger each week in a vague approximation of a game called football, so I know it well. Yes, it could do with a facelift, but even I would question the priority list which sets aside a chunk of cash while cutting vulnerable people's benefits. Rather than the usual council tax follies we witness each year, these are the things to which the democratic process should provide answers.
And from Matt Chatfield, I've been thinking a lot about how we look after our countryside and wildlife. Not entirely selflessly, as working in that field has been my career since 1989, and today is my last day as a countryside professional. I've had 2 great years working for Island Countryside Charity Gift to Nature, and now I'm moving on. But I don't imagine the countryside will be grinded to a halt in my absence. My 2 years in the charitable sector have led me to wonder why, if we're so keen on the countryside, do we not want to pay for it? Now the Isle of Wight Council can no longer fund its nature reserves. That's a big question to be answered. And the solutions that might work for leisure centres or car parks don't seem to apply here. A walk on a nature reserve ought not to need a ticket. Would you put 50p in a turnstile every time you walk the dog, or buy an annual subscription to go picnicking? I'm not sure I would. That is the problem. Keeping our countryside safe, beautiful and full of wildlife costs money. Those views across Sandown Bay from Brading Down, who pays to keep the fences safe and bushes cut back to reveal a panoramic view of the bay? Not the majority of people who stop their cars on the downs to enjoy the vista. Pay per visit would be a fairly haphazard system to protect such an important resource. Countryside is something we love and value. Yet there is no way to pay for its upkeep. Or is there? Have you ever noticed just what a great bargain the Isle of Wight gets out of the National Trust? Huge areas of the island's landscape are beautifully maintained and free to use, supporting many local businesses and giving us all some great places to visit. Think of Culver Down, West High Down, Brightstone Down, Newtown, Borthwood, and many more, all free. How is this done? With help from money generated at paid attractions such as Mottiston Manor and the Needles Battery, and even from big mainland places such as Chartwell and Polesden Lacey. The National Trust has to pay for itself, and by doing so it is subsidising the Isle of Wight's free countryside significantly. So here's my idea. Let's save the rest of the island's countryside in the same way. We can't abandon all those beautiful nature reserves the Isle of Wight Council can no longer afford to fund, and we can't expect visitors to pay for them. So if we give over the countryside to charity to look after, We should also give some way to pay for it, like the income from some beach, cafes or car parks. And if that kind of commercial setup doesn't appeal, well then, maybe we could once again pay for such things out of taxes, like any civilised nation should.
And this article is about Ventnor Winter Gardens by Laurie Little, and she writes, Ventnor Winter Gardens is finally rising phoenix-like from a mixed past. There was an emptiness hanging over Ventnor for a few years. Something was amiss. Perched ominously at the edge of the cliff, surveying the English Channel and busy seafront below, stood Ventnor Winter Gardens. It was chained closed, and rumour had it the auditorium was full of water. Where once The Who and David Bowie had played, there was now a decaying building, sold by the Isle of Wight Council for a mere £1. Since 1936, the iconic Art Deco building had been the hub of the town, a much-loved and bustling centre, the home of theatre, music and community events. But when the doors shut in 2011, there was little signs of life or hope, despite planning permission to convert it into a hotel. Now it is as if a new life has been breathed into the place. A new era has dawned. The building was memorably purchased for £1 in 2011 by the Hamborough Group, which owns the nearby Hamborough Hotel. It still owns the Winter Gardens, but the planning permission has timed out, and the idea of converting it into a hotel has been quietly dropped. However, to give credit where credit is due, the group has pumped more than £1 million into the building in recent years. Much of this went on essentials not necessarily spotted by an interested public, such as drying out the sodden floor, installing a new boiler, making improvements backstage and doing external rendering and vital maintenance to the roof. The plan is to resurrect the building to its former glory, and it is becoming more obvious now improvements are indeed happening. A new team is in place, led by General Manager Terry Wood, since January 2017, and she has overseen a revamp of the interior decor. The balcony room has had an Art Deco makeover and features a cocktail and continental beer bar. The balcony itself has been decked, as has the roof terrace. The last time anyone can remember the roof terrace being used was when the Queen visited in 1965. For decades after, wasted decades, concern over its safety rendered it closed until its recent renovation.
During all those years, the Winter Gardens missed out on utilising such a valuable asset. But now, the roof terrace is there for all to enjoy, its glorious panorama over the town one way and out to the sea the other. Terry is enthusiastic about getting the place restored to the standard of the revered De La Warr Pavilion, a 1935 building in Bexhill-on-Sea that has retained its modernist style. With Terry at the helm, the Winter Garden is busy again. It retained a staff of 10 over the winter months, and the catering has gone up more than a few notches, and the place is thriving, with events for all ages and plenty of community involvement. Terry explained, the Winter Gardens had lost its identity. As a venue, people were not sure what it was anymore. Now we are predominantly a venue for hire, for weddings, events, functions and conferences. Additionally, it is a great place to come and enjoy the view, whether over a coffee or a full meal. It is a place for everyone, the whole community. This is one of the most predominant buildings in Ventnor, and so many people come in here with a story to tell about it and their memories of it. This place has a history. It is not new, and that is what pulls the heartstrings. The common goal of everyone here is to respect that and to make it accessible for all. We want people to be proud of the Winter Gardens once more. We know a lot of needs doing aesthetically to it, but there is a 5-year plan to get it back to its glory days. One of the new community-centred projects is the friendly social afternoons to the older generation, held on last Monday of each month from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m, except bank holidays. This involves a chance to meet community navigator Nina Collinane, who works as part of the Age Friendly Island project, and get involved with the fun quizzes, bingo, raffle, book swaps and plenty of chat. There is a further chance to get social at the free tea dances, held regularly featuring old-time music tunes. A different customer base would have enjoyed last week's over-18s roller disco, and they might have their eye on the inflatable race night featuring blow-up Diddy cars on March the 8th. Outside, pro wrestling takes place on March the 10th. Dame Darcy Bustle is leading a dance class on June the 10th. And on July the 6th, there's an Only Fools and Three Courses event based on the TV series. Children are also catered for, with recent half-term events including free pancake races and a Valentine's disco. Add to this the dance workshops, world-being events, drum and bass nights. It's a job to keep up. The building is once again the home of Ventnor Theatre Group after a 5-year break while the venue was closed. The group has been backed for pantomime for 3 years now and is busy rehearsing Cats, which will be performed in May. The Winter Gardens is also forming a link with the Samaritans to make the venue a place where people can pop in and talk to someone through an outreach service with drop-in sessions. The venue has recently been licensed for weddings, for 3 rooms, the main auditorium, the main bar and the balcony room. This means it is suitable for intimate ceremonies, but it's also one of those rare venues that can cater for extra-large guest lists. The capacity is for 400 evening guests. Ventnor Winter Gardens now stands proudly at the edge of the cliff, surveying the English Channel and busy seafront below, bustling with life and gleaming in the sunshine.
And this is about what's on. And the Isle of Wight Youth Concert Band is presenting their evening of spring concert on Friday the 2nd of March at 7:30 at St Mary's Church, Cowes. Tickets on the door, £10 adult, £5 child, including refreshments in the interval. It's supported by Ireland Concerts.
And if you've ever dreamed of being on stage for the Oscars ceremony, the next best thing you could do and see it come true is when a touring musical review comes to the island. Robert J. Sherman, the son of Robert B. Sherman, one of the legendary Sherman brothers, will be accompanying the show. A Spoonful of Sherman, which will be coming to Shanklin Theatre for 3 nights starting on April the 18th. A Spoonful of Sherman is a musical review to celebrate the century of Sherman family songwriting in Hollywood. The globally acclaimed Sherman brothers wrote the songs for some of Walt Disney's most famous films, including Mary Poppins, The Jungle Book, Aristocats, as well as Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Songs featured includes Superfragilistic, Expedalidocious, Chim Chim Cheree, and Let's Go Fly a Kite. As a great bonus for musical fans, the show will feature an original Oscar and Grammy Award. This will allow for some unique photo opportunities, and there will be relevant memorabilia on display at the theatre, said the theatre's bookings manager Vic Farrow. The production will include a stunning set design, integrated projection, 2 pianos and a cast.
The Newport Isle of Wight Jazz Weekend will take place May the 31st to the 3rd of June this year. It features many artists, including the BBC Big Band, Claire Martin, Derek Nash, Skelton Skinner All-Stars, Picante, Karen Sharp Quartet, Sarah Dowling Quartet, Freddie Gavita Quartet, the Alley Cats, Georgia Mancio's Quadro, Craig Milverton and Bruce Adams, Andrew McCormack, Nick Page Quintet, the Isle of Wight Youth Jazz Orchestra, Prohibition Jazz and Urban Nomads. There is a website, Newport Jazz Weekend, and tickets are on sale now at the Isle of Wight County Press.
And the Britain-Norman Aircraft Preservation Society, BNAPS, is celebrating 50 years since the island Islander aircraft currently being restored made its first scheduled passenger flight for the newly formed Aruni Air Services. A celebration will be held next Saturday, March the 3rd, from noon to 4 p.m.
And this is about getting online and getting help with getting online. Do you need help getting online, accessing the internet, setting up an email address or job searching? Cowes Library has a digital support assistant who can provide free one-to-one sessions on Friday mornings between 10 and noon. Sessions must be booked in advance. The library also has a friendly, experienced family historian offering one-to-one sessions in helping with family history. Sessions are in Cowes Library on Monday mornings at £6 per hour and must be booked in advance. If this time is not convenient, speak to a member of staff who will try to arrange an alternative time. And the number for booking is 293341.
And there's an additional little letter here from William Hans Bromwich of Cowes. He writes, having had time to read and reflect upon the acute services redesign plan, one can't help but wonder if St Mary's Hospital, with its proposed declining service provision, requires a huge team of executives, all on massive six-figure salaries. Surely all that's required to run our tiny island hospital is a fairly competent junior manager following an A1 algorithm.
And Laurie Little writes about the Isle of Wight group, the Bees. The Bees fly again in new colours. Anyone who's wondered over the last few years whatever happened to the Bees is in for a nice surprise. Founding member of the popular island band, Aaron Fletcher, and Bees musician Tim Parkin have formed a new group called 7778, and they have been signed to Heavenly Recordings. Their first 7-ins sold out in 48 hours, and their London debut is at OMEARA on March the 26th. In the 7 years since their last album, Aaron has kept on doing what he'd always done, playing records, writing tunes and doing a bit of recording. With the Bees on extended shore leave, he hooked up with Tim to work on the music that would become their new project, the album Jellies. Aaron said the last Bees album came out in 2010 and this one's taken about 4 years to record. We've been chomping at the bit. We've all had kids and got married, but the itch hasn't gone away. I still love making music, songwriting, producing, getting in the studio. Me and Tim were like, woohoo, there's still some legs in us. Let's go for it. There's an absolute joy to this and we really want to capitalise on that. We're more happy than we've ever been and we want people to see that. There's a lot of fun here. 7778 is a beautiful vehicle and me and Tim want to give it a roll and see what happens. The album was recorded in an old water tower near Osborne House, which once belonged to the Queen Victoria. The tower has been converted into Studio Humbug. Follow 7778 on Facebook. And it's goodbye from Pauline. Have a nice weekend.
Good night bye from Barry for the time being. And although the weather is like being in Siberia, we hope you have a nice weekend. Thank you.
This is the BBC.
This is InTouch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Tonight, how strong is the link between the losing of your sight and developing mental health problems? And how equipped are current services to see that connection and offer the right help? The question has arisen after the tragic case of Nina Davis, who took her own life last year after several warning signs that she was in serious distress. A close friend and her mother both believed that the services Nina received failed to appreciate the link between visual impairment and mental health, and that her death could have been avoided if that connection had been better understood. A serious incident investigation on the treatment Nina received from Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Trust, which the Trust itself conducted, confirms that not enough consideration was given to Nina's visual impairment. Well, Lee Kumatat has been hearing more about Nina's story.
Nina Davis became visually impaired as a young child and lost the rest of her vision when she was 17. Her mum Tracy Middleton and her good friend Diane Fonseca gave me a picture of the person Nina was.
She says she wanted a bike at one time, and her dad and everybody else says you can't have a bike. She says, why? She says, you can't see, you can't ride it. So she went out on the street, met this young lad, started riding his bike, come back up the street, told us, she says, look, I can ride his bike, so I want a bike. That's the sort of person Nina was.
Nina's came on holiday with me to Seychelles in 2014 because my daughter lives there, and took part in a midnight sea rescue with no problems at all. She had a really good character. She was good fun to be around. She used to listen to everybody else and was full of good advice.
Nina was in her sixth form year, living and studying at the Royal National College for the Blind, or RNC, in Hereford, at the time she became totally blind. To her mother's knowledge, Nina wasn't offered any counselling, but Tracy feels her daughter might not have accepted it anyway because Nina's sight loss didn't seem to have an immediate negative impact on her.
When she first lost her sight, I think she was quite happy because everything was new down in Hereford. It was a new start. She was living with people with visual impairment. She'd got her first boyfriend. She was quite happy and contented going out and partying. So I don't think that the blindness came into it as much then.
A few years after leaving the RNC, Nina took a social work degree, which she completed, achieving a 2-1. Her focus then turned to finding a job in her chosen field, but she couldn't find one.
After university, she says, right, that's it now. She was going to find a job. And she's tried for the last 5 years. She's applied for different jobs. She's took on voluntary work to get a job, hoping that it would lead to a job, but unsuccessfully.
As well as employment, Nina's ambitions were finding a long-term partner and becoming a mum herself. In 2016, at the age of 31, 2 major losses in Nina's life took their toll: the death of her first guide dog and the breakdown of a relationship.
She was in a relationship at the time, 18-month relationship. When it fell apart, she just seemed to disappear, basically. She wasn't the same person. I just thought it was because she was heartbroken at first. And I think it was because of that. But she did say to me when she was in the relationship that they was on about having a family and getting married and having children. And she actually said, if I couldn't get a job, I'm just going to resort to being a mother, which is what she ever wanted.
So do you think that life perhaps didn't take the path that she had always hoped it would?
Yes.
What did she blame that on?
Not being good enough. Not being able to see was a big factor at that time.
Did she have many visually impaired friends?
She made quite a few friends when she was in RNC. She used to keep in contact with them by phone or Facebook. She'd get on the train and go and visit them, and with her first guide dog and things like that.
So it's not really a far stretch to think that she did see people who were visually impaired living the kind of successful life that she wanted to live.
Yeah.
She didn't see that as a, well, if they can do it, I can do it kind of situation.
But she wanted to know why she couldn't get it. She probably thought she could get it, but she wanted to know why. It wasn't happening for her, whereas it had happened for everybody else.
Nina's friends and family began to see changes in her behaviour and her ability to cope. Nina was more and more withdrawn and clearly depressed. She began to feel that her perceived failings in life were a direct result of her blindness. Here's her friend Diane Fonseca.
The mental health actually impacted on all aspects of her life. It impacted on her independence within the home and looking after herself. It impacted on her ability to actually get out and about and be mobile. And whilst she was previously a very independent traveller with a guide dog, she really lost a lot of mobility skills actually, and she'd lost the confidence to use the skills that she did have. Nina had always denied that her sight loss impacted on her quality of life, but I sort of posed a question and said, look, Nina, this minute, how much of this is to do with your sight loss? And she said, everything.
In November of 2016, Nina was prescribed antidepressants and referred to a counselling charity for cognitive behavioural therapy, described as a talking therapy designed to help you manage your problems by changing the way you think and behave.
She initially went for counselling, but that session only lasted 8 minutes. And the counsellor brought that session to a close, saying actually CBT wasn't the type of counselling that she was needed.
Cognitive behavioural therapy. Yes.
So that session was brought to a close and said, actually, given the information that Nina had told her and shared, she said, actually, what you really need is bereavement, loss and grief type therapy to come to terms with the significant losses that you've had in your life. So then I think she entered the crisis team in Birmingham. She was on a pathway of care there. But that in itself sort of created additional challenges because the team that she was under really didn't understand the physical challenges that she had to access the services. They would send information in a document through email, which that was Nina's preferred method of communication, but they didn't ask to check whether the assistive software that she was using was compatible and whether she could actually access it all.
As Nina's depression deepened, she went to live with her mother in Sandwell to try and safeguard her own mental health. However, Sandwell is out of the jurisdiction of the Birmingham Mental Health Trust. This caused confusion and difficulty around which service should be looking after Nina. During the next 6 months, Nina tried to communicate her acute psychological distress to a number of mental health professionals and on at least one occasion asked specifically for help that would take her disability into account. She also made 3 attempts on her life. As well as being Nina's friend, Diane Fonseca is also a trained rehabilitation officer for visually impaired people. Diane went along to appointments with Nina as her friend, but also as her advocate.
They weren't really listening to Nina. They didn't have a clear understanding of the challenges that she faced. They didn't listen to her, and they actually didn't listen to me either. I'm a qualified rehabilitation worker for vision impaired, and I thought naively that I would just rock up there, I would share my skills, my knowledge, and they would welcome that information and they'd say, oh, thank you for sharing that, and we need to do this, this and this, and that didn't happen.
What would you like to see happen now in terms of mental health provision for visually impaired people? Start with you, Tracy.
Staff to receive mandatory sight loss awareness training, because they're going to be seeing a lot more partially sighted people, visually impaired people.
And what about you, Di?
I mean, personally, I think there needed to be a more holistic approach to treating Nina. She had a guide dog. Guide dog should have been brought in and looked at her mobility and how her ability was being impacted by her mental health, and could you get support in that way. They could have tapped into the social work of her vision impairment in her area, and they may have been able to come and offer support.
Do either of you think or feel Nina's suicide could have been prevented?
Tracy's struggling to talk at this moment.
Okay.
The answer is a resounding yes. I think there was so much more could have been done. And it starts actually with just one word, and it's care. People needed to care.
That was Nina Davis, close friend Diane Fonseca, and Nina's mother, Tracy Middleton. Lee, after Nina's death, the Trust held a serious incident investigation, as we mentioned. What did that say?
The Trust did carry out its investigation, the findings of which were no advice or support was sourced from any blind service to help formulate a care plan for Nina, that there was no joint working with Sandwell crisis team or any attempt to support Nina made while she was in Sandwell. The lessons learned were that not enough consideration was given to Nina's disability and the impact it was having on her. In a statement, the Trust told us that a further review of that investigation is now being carried out, again by the Trust itself, and so they couldn't comment further.
Lee Cummertat, thank you very much indeed. So what are the options for people who feel they need help coping with the loss of their sight? Amanda Hawkins heads the RNIB's Sight Loss Counselling Service. She gave me her reaction to Nina's case.
It's just tragic, isn't it? It's a real tragic loss. And even though I've heard the story before, listening to it again just now still really moves me.
And what are the things that most strike you about the story?
that she didn't get the help that she needed, that there was support out there that the local trust could have tapped into to make that whole transition into the mental health service easier for her so she could get the help that she desperately needed at that time.
The thing that surprised us was something that has been mentioned by the serious incident investigation which has followed this, which is that there seemed to be no link up with organisations that might be expected to understand visual impairment, including the RNIB.
Exactly, and the team that I'm responsible for and run do an awful lot of consultation with other NHS trusts to help that transition, and they come to us and ask our opinion. How can we best facilitate this patient at this point, and what do we need to be aware of and consider?
Just tell us a bit more about what the RNIB's service to people who need some form of counselling. What do you offer?
OK, so the sight loss counselling team at RNIB is a 22-person strong counselling team with an expertise of not just counselling, but also the myriad of ways people can lose their sight. And we offer about 8 to 10 sessions to people who are affected by sight loss. And we don't just offer that to people who are losing their sight or have lost their sight, but anyone in that family unit that might be affected by that. And the thing that's really important that we find and that our clients tell us is the fact that they don't have to upskill the professional in front of them in their particular sight loss condition makes it easier to talk about what they need to talk about at the time that they need to talk about it.
So you mean they are happier talking to someone who gets it?
Exactly. When you're really struggling, to have to educate the person that's there to listen and help you through that is just another burden.
You took on this role, I think, in 2009.
That's right.
What did you assume would happen when a visually impaired person is first diagnosed with sight loss?
When I took on this role, I assumed that there would be an automatic referral into psychological support, knowing the difficulty and adaptation to sight loss. It's a major sense.
And what actually happens?
Nothing.
In terms of the treatment Nina did receive, what, in your opinion, should have happened?
Obviously, she was referred to the community mental health team. They obviously did some assessments there. What didn't happen was the acknowledgement of how significant her sight loss was to her identity at that point. And I think that was what was missed. So I think a lot of the time they were saying to her, this is not about your sight loss, but actually it was a sight loss plus lots of other losses. Her mum talked about the loss of her relationship. I think she'd also lost a dog. So, you know, there was some significant things going on in her life.
She was offered treatment with a visually impaired psychologist because the trust seemed to have understood that Nina did want to talk to someone who understood a bit about visual impairment. So there they were trying, weren't they?
If that person understood her, great. From what we understand, she didn't feel understood at that point. And from what I can understand, she was still being given bits of paper and forms which she couldn't access even at that point. It felt like it was a secondary thing. They were dealing with depression and not thinking about the sight loss at that point.
What about when people realise they need help? Because it isn't necessarily absolutely at the point of diagnosis, is it?
It isn't, and it very rarely, funny enough, is at the point of diagnosis. Where we see most people coming into our service is at the critical incident point. So it's when it really matters to them. And that can be very personal for very different people. We had one guy who walked into his office one day. He had a degenerative sight condition, and he walked into the office and they changed the desk around and he couldn't find his desk. And it was at that point it really hit him, and that's when he came into counselling.
So it could be that, it could be to do with something that happens in a relationship.
Absolutely, a loss of a partner, a breakdown of a relationship. You know, for teenagers, it's the point when they realise that they're not going to be able to drive. When the opportunities maybe aren't the same.
Clearly, there have to be structures here with the way that people actually get treated. What do you think about the way that that's done at the moment in the case of people with visual impairment?
There's two medical pathways that exist in the NHS at the moment. One is the sight loss pathway, and that goes through the eye clinic, your ophthalmologist. The other one is through depression. and the mental health team. And it's a real shame that those two don't interact more, because we know people with sight loss are 13.5% more likely to become depressed. And I think there are ways of working with this. I think GPs could be screening for depression, so they know somebody who's coming into their consultation room, just to be asking the question, how are you doing? We could also be screening in eye clinics. So we need to put as many opportunities to ask the question, how are you? How are you coping?
Some people may still be questioning how much visual impairment and mental health are interlinked, or inevitably interlinked. But you do have some statistics about that, don't you?
Well, we do know from the research that we've done at RNIB that 79% of people, when surveyed, who were losing their sight, said they wanted someone to talk to. And sadly, only 19% of them actually do get to talk to someone. We are actually trying to do a little bit more about that. RNIB, obviously, we're a charity. We get very good support from the board, but we can only see a certain amount of people, and sight loss is a growing issue. So we're trying to work cross-sector across the whole of the sight loss charities to develop an accreditation scheme where people who are generically trained in counselling can come and do a course with RNIB and Vision UK to give them the skills that they might need to work with someone with sight loss, so that we can recommend other counsellors, not just counsellors from our service, other counsellors maybe locally to them that they can go and see.
And you've seen the conclusions that the serious incident investigation came to. Mm-hmm. Do you broadly agree with those? And are they likely to, the recommendations, are they likely to bring about a change, do you think?
I hope so. I mean, I really hope that something good comes of this awful situation. So I hope that they can listen to what may have worked better for people like Nina. And I just hope that we can get to this point where we start to be able to normalise our negative emotions around sight loss, instead of actually saying, isn't it great? People with sight loss can use a liquid level indicator. They've got a white cane. It's a really positive spin, which is great. But for some people, that's not helpful. For some people, they just need to know, actually, today I'm not feeling very good, and it is to do with my sight loss, and I need to get some help. So just normalising that and acknowledging that, I think it goes a long way to help other people.
Amanda Hawkins of the RNIB's Sight Loss Counselling Service. For people who want to know more, we do have phone numbers and links to the RNIB's helpline and other organisations on our website. And you can get that information from our action line for 24 hours after the programme on 0800 044 044. You can also email InTouch at bbc.co.uk. From me, Peter Wight, and joint producers today, Lee Kumatat and Georgina Hughes, goodbye.